The Astra Zeneca Oxford Covishield vaccine. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'd lost my voice for a few days. I just got it back this evening. So you'll have to bear with me for that. Just a quick introduction of myself. I'm a family physician. I did my MD in family medicine from the UK. I worked in the NHS for 15 years before I moved here, just under 5 years ago. As a family doctor, I see my role as providing medical evidence to my patients and helping them make wise choices, healthy choices. And I guess today is a very good example of that. Today, anyone who expects me to tell them which vaccine to take or which vaccine to not take may feel a bit disappointed. I'll see my role as advising you on the current science, the current statistics. However, the decision is yours to make. And I will just try to talk you through the scientific evidence and make that an easier process for you. So, of course, scientific evidence does change dynamically, and it's very likely that my opinion would change with change in medical opinion. This vaccine is currently being evaluated in several countries, and we do expect a lot of news and analysis to come out over the next 2 weeks. So everything I say today is applicable to the situation as of today. Now, if you just give me 1 second, I will quickly check that our streams are working. And I will also just need to enable it. Here it is. And then we can get started. This appears to be a very popular topic. I'm getting a lot of patients asking me this question, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to advise them and also perhaps just point them towards this video, provided that the information stays relevant. Of course, I do make changes to my blog as we go along. So I'm just going to check that this is working. Relevant. Of course, it seems to be working, so that's great. Let's start. We are live on YouTube as well as Facebook. If anyone has any questions, then please go ahead and ask me those questions. You can type them. I will try my best to remember to check any type messages and answer those as we go along. There is an element of YouTube and Facebook messaging. We do have a Google Live link as well if anyone wants to join the live video. I would request you, however, that we keep everything confidential. It's very important to maintain patient confidentiality. So if you have any questions, please ask those questions in a third-party anonymous format, and I'll attempt to answer those in a third-party anonymous format so that we can maintain confidentiality of patients. So here we are. This is I believe it's my 33rd blog in the last 12 months. We have blogs ranging from management of COVID-19 to various vaccine blogs. So please feel free to look through these. Today we'll be focusing on the Astra Zeneca Oxford Covishield vaccine update. So first, let's talk about the efficacy, because when patients talk about the Oxford vaccine, often they are concerned about the initial efficacy that they saw in the initial studies. Now we must remember, when we compare studies or trials of vaccines, it's not an even playing field. It's not like comparing apples to apples. And certainly in the case of Oxford vaccine, compared to other vaccines, it's certainly not an even playing field. Pfizer and Moderna, where the trials were done in the US, they were done earlier on when we didn't have as many variants. The trials for other vaccines such as Oxford, Johnson, Novavax were done later when we did have variants. These trials were done in countries such as Brazil and South Africa where variants had become quite prevalent. And there were also other nuances, other differences. As an example, the vaccine trials for Moderna and Pfizer only tested for COVID-19 if patients had any symptoms. On the other hand, during the Astra Zeneca Oxford trial, the participants, and I believe there were more than 40,000, were tested weekly for COVID-19, which means that asymptomatic COVID-19 was also picked up in the Oxford AstraZeneca trial, which would, as you can imagine, make the efficacy number look less rosy, less good compared to Pfizer Moderna. So it's very important to understand that trials are not even, be it for location, be it for timing, be it for variants, and be it for study design. So comparing trials can be unhelpful from an efficacy point of view. I always say to patients, the most important number is how effective the vaccine is at keeping you out of hospital and preventing death. And so far, all vaccines appear to be 100% effective or very close to 100% effective at doing that. And so that's a very good thing. So here we have this study, which was studying the first dose effectiveness of Pfizer in patients age 70 plus, as well as Oxford. And so this was a study, and now this is not efficacy. Here we're talking about effectiveness. So you'll remember the numbers are much bigger. For efficacy trials, the numbers may be 40,000 patients. Here, they looked at 7.5 million patients above the age of 70. They found that 4 weeks after the first dose, the effectiveness of Pfizer ranged from 57 to 61%, and the effectiveness of Oxford ranged from 60% to 73%. So for the first dose, Oxford appeared to be slightly more effective than Pfizer. Please bear in mind, this was in patients above age 70, and it was a single dose study. They did not look at effectiveness after that single dose. Secondly, the effectiveness of Pfizer and Oxford in patients in the UK above the age of 80. Here, both of these at preventing hospital admission, here both of the vaccines appear to be more than 80%. I believe the number was more like 83% at preventing hospitalization around 3 to 4 weeks after the shot. So that was great. In case anyone's interested in looking at these studies, you can please go ahead. This was the study of Pfizer and Oxford in older adults. This is some more study data, and this is the US phase 3 trial done in the US. This showed, this was for Oxford vaccine. In the US, it showed over 80% efficacy in patients aged above 65, 79% overall, and 100% efficacy against severe or critical disease. Again, good data. And you would recall that some authorities had advised for AstraZeneca to not be used in older patients because of a lack of data. Well, this fixed that. This trial was published on the 22nd of March. It was done in the US, large trial, about 32,500 patients, showed 80% efficacy, 65 age and above. And from here onwards, no authorities had any qualms about recommending the AstraZeneca vaccine in older patients because it's shown to be efficacious. And again, we keep thinking about 95% in those smaller trials. Here in the UK, a single dose of Pfizer was shown to be 72% effective after the first dose and 86% effective after the second dose. So it's also important that we don't just keep that first number in our minds. We have to look at effectiveness going forward as we start getting more real-time information. As an example, Israel is a country which has vaccinated the vast majority of its population, and we're getting very useful numbers from there. the message that I'm trying to put across through these 3 trials that I have put in front of you: Pfizer effectiveness in the UK, Oxford effectiveness in the USA, first dose effectiveness 80 plus age in preventing hospitalization, first dose effectiveness 70 plus for symptomatic disease for Pfizer and Oxford. The message I'm trying to put across to you is that please don't just get hung up on that first number that you came across in the small studies. The effectiveness data shows that these vaccines are not that different to each other. They are fairly similar. Pfizer and Moderna may well have that edge, but it's not that great big edge that you thought it was. And as we discussed before, there were differences in the studies as well. Next, let's talk about putting medical risk into context. If someone says to you, the risk is 1 in a million or 1 in 100,000, what does that mean to you? How do you put that risk into context? Well, this study showed that almost 1 in 1,500 patients could get an anaphylactic shock reaction when given an anti-inflammatory such as aspirin or ibuprofen. 1 in 1,500. Severe allergy can occur in 1 in 5,000 patients to whom we give an injection of penicillin. In Canada, all patients above the age of 50 are recommended to either have a stool test or a colonoscopy. The risk of serious complications such as gut perforation or death is about 3 in 1,000 colonoscopies. And I always put my references on my blog, so you're more than welcome to examine and appraise those references. It talks about all the complications, hemorrhage, perforation, etc. And in fact, the 3 out of 1,000 was for death. If you go through the paper, the risk of general anesthesia death, which is never waking up when you're put to sleep for any kind of operation, is about 1 in 100,000. So when we talk about vaccine-related risk, we need to put these things into perspective. Severe reaction to aspirin, 1 in 1,500. Severe reaction to penicillin, 1 in 5,000. Death related to colonoscopy, 3 in 1,000. The risk of death because of anesthesia, 1 in 100,000. So now let's talk about the Oxford vaccine and the risk of a rare blood clot. Now talking about blood clots, I'm sure patients have been left a bit confused with regards to the Astra Zeneca vaccine. And there is a reason for that. You will recall that the European Medicines Agency and several countries, and one country in Europe, Thailand, has had suspended use of AstraZeneca vaccine for 2 weeks, but then recommenced. Here, they were talking about common blood clots, DVTs, deep vein thromboses, PEs, pulmonary embolism. These are the most common types of blood clots. And we know the risk factors for these. They include obesity, being on the contraceptive pill, long distance travel, having varicose veins, etc. There was a question about the risk of blood clots with this vaccine. It eventually turned out that in fact there were fewer blood clots in the vaccinated patients than normal patients. As we know, COVID-19 itself increases the risk of blood clot by about 9 times, 9-folds, which might explain that as well. Hence, the vaccination was restarted. However, there was a subgroup of patients within that those patients having blood clots, which had a very rare type of blood clot. And this is a type of blood clot where you get low platelet counts. And then there was more focus on that rare type of blood clot. Although here we're talking about cerebral sinus thrombosis, which is a type of blood clot in the brain, we have now recognized that it appears, and this is being investigated, that this vaccine may be related to this rare type of blood clot in other parts of the body as well. And this is an autoimmune reaction where it appears that the body produces antibodies against the combination of this vaccine with your immune system. It just causes this kind of misfire, and antibodies created against platelets will then cause platelets to aggregate and clot. It's because of that platelet aggregation that the number of platelets available in the bloodstream go down, and on doing a blood test, the platelet counts are reduced. So, the most recent data from the MHRA, which is the Medication Regulatory Authority in the UK, they reported 22 cases of cerebral sinus thrombosis and 8 other blood clots with low platelets, so very likely to be a very similar picture, out of 18.1 million doses of Astra Zeneca. Now, we don't know what the background rate of this rare complication is in the general population, but let's say for argument's sake it's 0. And if we were to overestimate causality at 100%, meaning every single one of these is related to the vaccine, which is unlikely. However, if we do that just for simplification, that would be 1 in 822,000 doses. And I have the references here that you're more than welcome to look at. The yellow card reporting is the side effect reporting in the UK. However, there was a twist in the tale when the German authorities came up with a hypothesis and also described a much higher background rate. They reported 31 cases of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis and 9 deaths out of 2.7 million people vaccinated. Again, for the sake of simplification, if we then put causality at 100%, that gives 1 case in 87,000 doses, which is 10 times higher than the UK. So Germany is reporting 1 case in 87,000 doses, while the UK is reporting 1 case in 822,000 doses of this vaccine. So what could explain the difference between these two? Well, there could be various differences. As an example, if you will recall, because of paucity in data for older patients, Germany was one of those countries in which they did not vaccinate older people. In fact, 90% of the people that Germans vaccinated were young, under the age of 60. On the other hand, the vast majority of patients who received this vaccine in the UK were older patients. Now, this reaction, which is considered to be similar to heparin-induced thrombocytopenia reaction, now has been given a new name, vaccine-induced thrombosis with thrombocytopenia. This is what you could describe as an aberrant misfiring of the immune system, or a overly strong immune response where you create autoantibodies against your own platelets. And this tends to be more severe in younger women, younger patients generally. Autoimmune diseases generally tend to be more common in women as well. We do tend to see more rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, and other kinds of autoimmune conditions in women. Also, a certain subset of women would be taking the oral contraceptive pill, which could increase risk of clotting, as could obesity and smoking. We don't know the exact figures for those things. However, the mechanism of action of a thrombogenesis related to autoimmune response is different to your standard blood clotting related to contraceptive, obesity, and smoking. And at this time, scientists don't think that those things are risk factors for this kind of reaction. So where does this take us? It is definitely plausible that the reason that Germany saw 10 times more cases than the UK did is because Germany was vaccinating younger patients and the UK was vaccinating older patients during that same time period. Going by the German data, which would be 1 case of this rare blood clot out of 82,000 patients, if you vaccinate 1 million people, you can expect 12 of them to have this rare blood clot and 4 of them to die. This is, of course, if we overestimate the causality at 100%. Now, if those 1 million people catch coronavirus, If those million people were 60-year-old, you'd expect about 20,000 of them to die, going by the current case fatality rate. If they were 40 years old, you would expect around 1,000 of them to die, going by current case fatality rate. So this would explain why the MHRA and the United Kingdom authorities are saying that it is the risk benefit is still in favor of the vaccine. They seem to be now coming to terms with the fact that this vaccine could well be associated with this rare complication. However, their take is that one person would be unfortunate, would be unlucky, but would be paying the price of what is essentially a national service of getting rid of this pandemic. Now, I've lived for 15 years in the UK. I understand that the sense of patriotism and nationalism that exists in that country. I have a British passport myself, and I can completely understand the rationale that if you vaccinate 1 million 40-year-olds, 4 people could die of a rare complication and 1,000 lives would be saved. Net benefit 996. I can completely understand how the British would accept that nationalistic, patriotic view. I think it's unlikely that anyone else would take that. Most others would take a much more egocentric and self-centered view of this, particularly those who have access to other vaccines would see their own risk and safety as a priority rather than propping up your national vaccine or your British brand vaccine. But I completely understand where the MHRA is coming in this case as well. Of course, 300,000 doses have now been administered in Canada with no reports of blood clots so far, which is kind of expected because in Canada it hasn't been really received widely by the younger population. Although health workers were in the first wave, it has primarily been older people, and 300,000 is perhaps not a sample size large enough to pick up those rare complications. So, what should you do? There is a very good document here which describes this condition and also advises you what to do. It does advise you on the kinds of risk factors and the kinds of things to look out for. Typically, symptoms will occur between day 4 and 20. Various symptoms which tend to be in line with what would happen if you had a stroke or a blood clot. Severe headache is something which is talked about a lot, which obviously is in context of cerebral sinus vein thrombosis, although you can get thrombosis in other parts. I believe yesterday in Australia there's a 40-year-old man who's been admitted into hospital with multiple blood clots and low platelets following the Astra Zeneca vaccine. That appears to be the first case in Australia, but he had blood clots in the portal vein in his liver. And so it's not always in the brain. It can happen anywhere. And increasingly it is appearing that there is a causal relationship between this vaccine and VIPIT, which is vaccine-induced blood clotting and low platelets. This is a very good reference. I would highly recommend it. Just getting back to the talking about vaccination also as a national service. We all know that Europe is struggling with the third wave. Cases are going up. I believe in France, the number of cases today were over 40,000. Look at UK. They have used primarily the Astra Zeneca Oxford vaccine. They have vaccinated over a third of their population. They did a recent serosurveillance where about 50% of the population had antibodies. They're getting close to herd immunity. Look at that graph. No matter how you look at it, the graph is not going anywhere. case numbers are just not rising in the UK compared to other parts of the world. So you could say here, the British have taken that risk with their vaccine, and by reducing the amount of disease in the community, they have reduced their own risk by doing so. So this is that kind of big circle. You take a small risk, we don't know how small it is, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million. The numbers go down in your community and your risk goes down further. That's another way of looking at it as well. I have shared a link here how you can book a COVID-19 vaccination in Ontario. Finally, I would just like to touch upon my personal views on how mechanistically this could be happening. I have to point out I'm not a virologist or an immunologist, just a mere family physician. But I do have some opinions, and I'm just posing these questions to those who know more than I do, so that they can get in touch with me and answer those questions. First of all, we did compare 2 trials where first doses of Oxford and Pfizer were compared, however, not the second doses. Looking at efficacy, however, it does appear that the efficacy of Oxford was not as good as Pfizer, Moderna, Novavax, or Johnson & Johnson in patients who had received the full schedule. We know that in viral vector vaccines, and Oxford is a viral vector vaccine, we have a problem where patients produce antibodies not just to the spike protein eventually produced, but also to the vector itself, the virus itself. In this case, we are using a chimpanzee adenovirus. One problem we have with these vaccines is that once you have the first shot, you then produce antibodies against the vector. When you have the second dose, you already have antibodies against the vector, which can make the second dose less effective. Because if those antibodies stop the viral vector from getting into your cells, it cannot then do the rest of the job, i.e. deliver the DNA into the nucleus, transcription to mRNA, translation to proteins, and expressed and taken up by your immune system. Interestingly, the other main viral vector vaccines came to this using a different technique. So Johnson & Johnson decided to use a single dose vaccine strategy, which means they don't have to worry about their second dose or immunity against antibodies against the vector in their second dose. Sputnik V vaccine, the Russian vaccine, used a human adenovirus like Johnson, but used 2 different adenoviruses for the prime and the boost. However, Oxford is the only vaccine using the same virus for prime and boost. Could that explain mechanistically why the efficacy is less than other platforms? The next question I have is with regards to the conformation of the spike which is produced by this vaccine. Even from when we did animal studies on chimpanzees before phase 1 trials, we knew that this vaccine would not confer sterilizing immunity. Sterilizing immunity is when you don't get even symptoms. Vaccines such as measles vaccine, for example, tend to give sterilizing immunity. Even the 5 chimpanzees given this after the vaccine, given a dose of COVID-19, one of them did get symptoms but did not die. This vaccine has been very, very, very good though in preventing death from COVID-19. It's been 100% across the board. Is it possible that this could be happening because of the spike being produced by this vaccine? Notably, the pre-fusion stabilized spike conformation used by Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson is the same spike. It was developed at the University of Texas with the National Institute of Health. However, Oxford has used a different formula for their full-length spike, and there were 2 amino acids changed in the spike to make it pre-fusion stable in the studies done at Texas, and I'm not aware of whether this was done in Oxford or not to make it more stable. Would that difference in spike formulation explain the fact that the efficacy has been less than other vaccines we tend to compare it to? And finally, here we're talking about overactive immune response, mostly in younger patients. Out of all the main vaccines we have, this is the only vaccine which uses a viral vector which is zoonotic, which means it's using a virus which is not naturally found in human beings. Now, of course, there is a advantage of that, hypothetically, in that if you use a zoonotic vector, then humans cannot have natural immunity against it, which means that the issue of your natural antibodies making the vaccine less effective doesn't happen. However, is this something which could be playing a role in an overreactive or a hyperactive, dysregulated immune system in that small fraction of patients? Perhaps anywhere between 1 in 80,000 to 1 in 800,000, depending on which population you're looking at, and resulting in this autoantibody for related thrombogenesis and low platelets. Of course, I'm not a virologist or immunologist, but these are three questions that come to my mind with regards to the efficacy and side effect profile of this particular vaccine. So that's the talk for today. I'm sure some people who are watching this video might be leaving a bit disappointed. Perhaps you were hoping that I would be advising you whether you should take a certain vaccine or not. And luckily, I have not received any questions on Facebook or YouTube, although I can see several people who are watching. But I'm kind of glad I didn't receive any questions about whether I should receive the vaccine or not. At this time, my suggestion is that you should just simply wait until wait out the suspension and see what comes out of that. So it certainly appears that in younger patients there is more risk with regards to an autoimmune process. We've always known that autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, are more common in females and younger females, and those patients certainly should avoid taking the vaccine until all the scientists have looked at this. Although the mechanism of blood clotting related to an autoimmune process and your standard blood clotting DVT-PE is different, it does make sense for patients who have risk factors for blood clots, namely patients who have obesity, perhaps on the contraceptive pill, smokers. It makes some sense for them to avoid this vaccine as well for the time being. So that's the talk for today. My parents seem to have arrived. It's a change of time, so I'll just invite them to quickly tell us how everything is in India, and then we can say good night from here. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to join the Meet link or just type those questions on Facebook Live or YouTube Live. Daddy Mummy, how are you doing today? You've muted now, Mummy. Oh, one second. It's my computer. It's my computer. Yes. How are you doing today?
We are fine. We are. God bless everyone. Thank you, Prasad. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's fine here. Here in India, it's working day Monday. So already getting ready for certain essential things to be done. and of course taking all precautions because the second surge, the second spike in COVID cases
Yeah.
has started.
And
So everything okay
we're
as
doing
usual.
exercises. Morning is 8:10.
Yes, so Daddy, do you have any questions? Have you heard about what's been happening with the Covishield vaccine, the rare incidence of blood clots? Have you been following that story, and do you have any questions at all?
Well, I have gone through your blog also, but I see for non-medical people, it's very difficult to understand if it's not explained in simple language. So, so what I understand is different for different countries and different people, different individuals. Well, obviously, not that dangerous as people may put it out to be, because even the incidences of clotting are also very rare, very rare. In fact, in India, no single case has been reported so far.
Yes, of course, there have been multiple deaths though, soon after vaccination, and often they were put down as a stroke or heart attack. Of course, one wonders whether they investigated those thoroughly enough to make sure these were not vaccine related thrombogenesis, because it can present in the form of a stroke or a heart attack as well. I would like to just quickly present again at the very end the numbers just to make it as simplified as possible, because I feel this really is the most, this is the end result. This is हिंदी में जैसे बोलते हैं निचोड़. The nichod is this, in my opinion, that first of all we need to be aware of the risk. When we give someone aspirin or ibuprofen, the risk of anaphylactic shock can be as high as 1 in 1,500 patients. When we give you an injection of penicillin, the risk of anaphylactic or life-threatening reaction can be 1 in 5,000. The risk of death or serious complication related to colonoscopy can be as high as 3 in 1,000. The risk of death with general anesthesia is 1 in 100,000. Depending on whether you give this vaccine in a low risk or a high risk patient. A low risk patient would be an older patient, I would say above the age of 55. The rate could be something like 1 in 822,000 doses. If we give it in a high risk patient, let's say in a young female, the rate could be as high as 1 in 87,000 doses. So just from the point of view of remembering, it could be anywhere from 1 in 80,000 to 1 in 800,000 doses. And going by the case fatality rate of COVID-19, if you give 1,000,000 people this vaccine, you could expect 12 of them to have a blood clot and 4 of them to die. However, if 1,000,000 60-year-olds catch coronavirus, you can expect 20,000 deaths. And if 1,000,000 40-year-olds catch COVID-19, you can expect about 1,000 deaths. That's compared to 4 deaths related to the vaccine. And the UK has vaccinated a third of its population, predominantly using this vaccine. And while Europe, US, and Canada are having spikes, the UK is flatlining because they're making their way towards herd immunity. Some people may well have paid us the ultimate sacrifice, but as a country, they are doing very well. And so one message that I want to take out from all of this is that while it's very important for us, human beings are naturally egocentric. We worry about ourselves, our safety, the safety of our loved ones. For patients who have a choice of another vaccine, I feel it is but natural that they may well want to wait or choose the other vaccine. I think that is perfectly natural and expected. Bear in mind the risk of a severe reaction allergy to Pfizer is about 1 in 100,000 as well. So no medication we ever give to you is completely safe. However, if you do not have a choice, for example, in India, if you're living in a state where they only give you Covishield, they do not give you Covaxin, it may well be considered as a service to your nation. Now, I have to be very careful saying this, to take the vaccine. The risk may be anything from 1 in 80,000 to 1 in 100,000. But as a population, if we take the vaccine, we will drive down the rates of infection, and as a result, you will become more safe. Because COVID 19 itself has a 9 times higher risk of blood clotting. COVID 19 causes blood clotting in 1 in 5 people that get COVID 19. And among hospitalized people, it causes blood clotting in 1 in 3 people. A third of people who get hospitalized with COVID 19 get blood clots. And so you have to balance both of these things out. A lot of people I see are looking at it in a very singular kind of fashion, where they're just looking at that fact that there could be a very small risk and they will refuse the vaccine. But I would urge them to also consider the risks, benefits, and wider population implications of that. And so there is no one right answer for this, but I would urge people to look at the broader picture in all of this. Teddy, any comments on that?
Thank you so much. We had our second dose.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
COVID.
so now that is
Covaxin,
understood that
Covaxin.
if a person doesn't take this Covishield AstraZeneca, then the person is much more at danger of clotting if he falls sick of COVID. And if the person takes, then the clotting is very, very rare. It is minimized to a great extent. So that's also a protection.
Yes, and sometimes we look at things in a very black and white fashion. We think about death or staying alive, but bear in mind, up to about 20% of patients who get COVID 19 get long COVID, long haul symptoms. They can get tiredness, breathlessness, fatigue, brain fog, confusion for months and months after the COVID illness. So often we look at things in a very black and white fashion, that either you live or you die. But there are lots of people suffering from long COVID symptoms as well. And so a vaccine is not just to prevent you from dying, but also to prevent you from getting those long COVID symptoms. So patients need to bear all of those things in mind when making that decision. That's the final take. So like I said at the very beginning, my job here is to not advise what someone should do or not do. My advice here is simply to provide information, give you the numbers, and allow patients to make their own informed, educated decision. I will just reiterate here, scientific knowledge changes day by day. This is being looked into and reported upon every single day. I think the situation will be different in 2 weeks' time. What I'm saying today applies to what the situation is at this time. So thank you so much, Daddy Mummy, for joining in. We will sign off from here.
One,
Thank you, everyone.
one moment, one comment I want to make, the final comment. It's about co-vaccine that we have taken of Bharat Biotech. And as you said, it's a service to nation. That was in my mind, and without giving a second thought, we took the first dose and also the second dose. And the minimum side effects were seen, but finally we are safe. Likewise, what we did is we have our elders about 100 years.
My parents.
We took them along. They also took. They are
Yeah,
also fine.
fine.
Now we are free to move around. I mean, with all the precautions, okay, fine. But at the same time, we know that we are not in that danger zone.
Yeah, we are proud of
Thank
our
you.
country.
Yes, and in fact, parents I remember took their first dose of vaccine just a day or 2 days before the efficacy numbers of 82% came out. So at that time, they did not even know how effective the vaccine is. But fortunately, when the
Yeah,
numbers did come out, they were very promising numbers.
yeah. 81,
And
81%.
that was the result of your medical talks.
Yeah,
Because through the
you
talks,
inspired us.
I came to understand that this has to be taken.
Thank you so much.
It's in
Thank you.
personal good. It is in social good. It is in national good.
God bless.
Yes, Daddy, and you will recall during my talks that I was always very positive about the Bharat Biotech vaccine, and I always had, scientifically, mechanistically, I had this feeling that it would turn out to be a good vaccine, although the evidence wasn't there, and it's gratifying to see that it was borne out, in that the efficacy does appear indeed to be very good. That's very nice. Great. So, just at the final, I would just like to say to everyone, this is a very common question for a lot of people. A lot of people are confused whether, if offered the Oxford AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine, whether they should take it, whether they should wait, what they should do. And so, I would request you, if you see anyone who is in that dilemma, in that confusion, feel free to forward this video to them, send it to them on Facebook, on YouTube, on WhatsApp, and I'm sure they will appreciate that. And so I'll see you all again in a week's time. Usually, the usual time is Sunday